I'm Jane Sterk. I'm leader of the Green Party of BC, and I welcome you to our online talk show, Green BC Solutions for a Better Future. I'm very pleased to welcome Bob St. John and Karl Stevenson from the Friends of Strathcona Park to our program. And it's great to have you guys here. I know that you're passionate about the park, and it's exciting to learn a little bit more about what's happening in Strathcona Park. And maybe I'll start with you, Karl, if you could tell us a little bit about what is the Friends of Strathcona Park, when did they form, and what do you do?
As far as I know, it was formed in 1986. And I guess I joined somewhere possibly early 87, or anyway, probably early 87. And it was formed because at that time the government was getting ready to chop the park in half and delete a whole bunch of areas from the park and introduce a lot more mining and other industrial efforts into the park. And so a bunch of people got together and tried to stop them from doing that.
And were you successful?
Well, we weren't initially successful. Initially, we did, I guess, several years of the normal routes of petitioning governments. Like we wrote letters, visited cabinet ministers, and everything we could to convince the government that they were making a mistake. And eventually, I guess, well, they would listen to us, maybe give us 15 minutes and pat us on the head, call us good citizens, thank us for coming, and then continue on with what they were doing. And eventually they started moving drill rigs into the park, and that's when we started a blockade in January 1988. And then, although I actually had told the Parks Minister that that would quite likely happen, he was actually vacationing in Mexico at the time that we started the blockade with his family, and he had to come back. And when we did get to meet with him, he was then eager to meet with us at that point, because by that time it had been on nightly TV steadily for quite a while, and it was building. And he said that he was very surprised, and I was a little bit surprised that he was surprised, because I had actually told him that that was a likely result. But I guess I don't know why he was surprised. Yeah.
So eventually you got to a stage where there was a management plan put in place for the park. And I assume that that management plan allowed the Friends of Strathcona Park some semblance of relief that the park was going to be preserved for recreational or wilderness purposes. Am I right in that? Or?
Yeah, well, like during the blockade, 64 people got arrested, and God knows how many hundred people showed up. I guess probably thousands eventually. And it was hugely labor intensive, very exhausting, and no fun at all. And by that time, like I said, we'd been fighting legitimately for several years. And with the blockade on top of that, it was a huge logistical problem. It was a long way from town, and a couple hours drive, 2.5 hours drive. So it was, and it was in the middle of January. The icicles were 8 feet long, and everybody, anyway, it wasn't very nice, but the effort involved was huge. And we were already tired from the years of effort we'd already put in. And so none of us wanted to repeat the experience again. So uppermost in our minds was trying to get some sort of safeguards in place so that we would never have to do it again. And the Strathcona Park Master Plan was one of those safeguards.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so that citizen initiative was crucial in getting that plan in place, in the sense that, wow, we can work together and we can create the conditions where the government actually responds to what the people want. And let's now move forward another, I guess, 20 years almost.
Yeah.
And talk about what is happening in the park right now. I know that we just had a notice yesterday that the Minister of the Environment is going to be approving an expansion of some what could be called commercial activity in the park on behalf of Clayoquot Wilderness Lodge. And I know that the Friends of Strathcona Park have been working diligently to try and persuade the minister that this is not a good thing to be doing. So, Bob, why don't you tell us a little bit about the current situation and what the Friends have been doing about that?
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, after the master plan was put in place, the Friends kind of had a sigh of relief that, okay, that the park is protected. And it's only in the last few years that we realized that governments generally have a memory of 10 years. And after 10 years, everything's fresh again, and they feel, okay, maybe times have changed. Let's try to see whether we cannot introduce commercialization in our parks. Yeah. We feel that one of the principles of the current government is that private enterprise should provide the services and infrastructure in our parks. And I think that's one of the reasons their policy of continual cutbacks in funding to parks sort of plays into that policy, i.e. they can say, we have no money, so therefore look at this lovely, nice commercial organization wants to do us a favor, and they'll help
take over stewardship
the services of the parks,
of the park,
because we need all the money to build, $480 million roofs over hockey rinks and stuff like that, but parks don't seem to play a big
really
factor.
Is. I mean, all kind of cynicism aside on the investment in infrastructure, this government has a belief that the private sector can do everything better than the public sector or the nonprofit sector, and that there really is no investment in the commons, the common good.
That's right.
And so the thought of preserving parkland for just park use or for wilderness preservation or for recreational activities at low cost to almost any British Columbian doesn't really factor into their model of privatization and belief that the private sector knows how to do everything better than the public sector.
That's right. They don't see any money in a wilderness park.
Yeah.
So the current situation is, as you mentioned, Clayoquot Wilderness Resort. They purchased 2 leases at the head of Bedwell Inlet, and this is on the southwest corner of the park. They're actually outside of the park, but they have high-end clients. If you want to spend $1,500 a day, you can go fishing or go horseback riding. And their horseback riding operations right now is outside of the park. But they, for various reasons, I believe, want to extend it into the park. I think they see the park as a safe haven for their business, whereas outside the park there's other political things happening in that where they have their horse riding operation right now, it may be logged. And that would obviously deter from their wilderness.
Not be as interesting.
It will not be as interesting. So they see the park as an opportunity to extend their commercial enterprise. And essentially what they're doing is they're taking a chunk of the park for their own use. And they claim that there's a public benefit by allowing the public to hike up their horse trail, which we do not see that as a public benefit. Currently, there is a road, an old road that goes up the Bedwell Valley, and I'll show you this map. The green is the road that goes up. That was logged in the 1960s, and that road had several bridges over the Bedwell River, plus some very high-energy streams that flow into the Bedwell. Since that time, a lot of it is washed away, and indeed, it's washed away right up to cliff banks. So the road is impassable in a lot of places. But the master plan originally said there would be no horses in the park except in 2 areas, really because one of the people on who made the master plan, or on the committee for the master plan, was the mayor of Gold River, and she was an avid horseback rider. so
she had her own little path in the park.
So there were a couple logging roads of insignificant value, really, to horseback riding that were allowed, but the rest of the park, it didn't actually say there'd be no horseback riding in the Bedwell, there'd be no horseback riding in all the other places. It just didn't mention horses, so it was just assumed that there wasn't. But in 2006, the government made an effort to try and amend the master plan because they felt it wasn't clear. And essentially what they did, they changed the criteria to suit this resort specifically. And last August, the master plan amendment passed, and now they sort of have the green light for CWR to go ahead and resubmit their permit application. And what they want to do, they want to replace a lot of the bridges that the old road had and has since washed away, and take horses up to a camp just about 12 kilometers up the river, out into the park. And they're going to put in essentially a commercial campsite for themselves and facilities for their horses. And the public is allowed to have, I believe, 2 out of the 8 tent pads if they want to use them, but only if the Clayoquot Wilderness Resort is not using them. So it's kind of, yes, there is some public benefit, but it's really secondary to the Clayoquot Resort's use. So we see this as the first commercial infrastructure for private use in Strathcona Park.
And are you contemplating that will then mean there would be more commercial activities, or do you think that so the concern is that it's just a start of a whole different way of using the park?
That's what we think.
And really tailored to high-end people who can pay a lot of money for wilderness experiential holidays, and then it detracts from the use of the park by ordinary British Columbians.
I don't think many ordinary British Columbians are going to spend $1,500 a day to use this facility.
Yep.
And horseback, there are a lot of horseback clubs on the island. They're not going to be able to barge their horses up. So it's really
specific to this.
It's a private operation.
Yep.
And it just sort of ties in with the current government's policy of turning over what is in the public trust to the private interests. And sure, this is the first one, and it comes on the 100th anniversary of the park.
Yeah, and the government has got all kinds of posters, talking about the 100 years of Strathcona Park and how good they've been at preserving the park, and so it's kind of an ironic timing in terms of a decision that's being made.
Yeah. And we feel that the government took a rather underhanded, sneaky way of bringing this in. There were 3 public meetings, really co-hosted by CWR and Parks together, in Tofino, Courtenay, and Victoria. And they didn't ask the public at these meetings, do you want horses in the park? They asked, how do we mitigate any environmental damage done by the horses in the park? So they came in with the assumption that they're going to have horses in the park, and how can we massage it so it's not as damaging.